You are listening to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about podcasting. So, if you are somebody that maybe had thoughts about possibly starting your own podcast, this is the episode for you. And if you maybe just started a podcast, Kim gives amazing tips on how to grow your audience. So, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast. I am here with Kim Parkinson. She is a podcast growth coach and producer who helps spiritually aligned women, entrepreneurs, amplify their voice and grow their visibility through podcasting. As the founder of KP Creative Media and host of the Podcasting for Spiritual Women podcast, Kim blends soulful strategy and technical know-how to support her clients in turning their message into a magnetic and meaningful presence. Her work empowers women to share their stories with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today.
I am so excited. We chatted a little bit beforehand, and I already know I got a ton of information just from our quick little chat. But if you want to let the listeners know a little bit more of how you got into this work and maybe dive into a little bit more of your zone of genius.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I started with a brick and mortar craft store in 2012. And I'm going to be 50 this year. So I've been around the block a couple times. But in 2012, my husband and I started a brick and mortar craft store. And at that time, I had already worked for a couple of different craft stores before that. And I was teaching women. And by women at that time, because I was probably in my 30s, at that time, they were in their 50s and 60s and beyond. And I was really teaching them confidence through art. So that could look something like them looking at their art and saying, I don't know what colors to choose today. And maybe explaining to them, why don't you start with the colors you already have on that you're wearing because you already chose those. You already made that decision. Let's take a decision away from you and let's move on with the color choices and the art and get that done. So very simple, maybe very simple and easy way to do that, but really a huge confidence booster. And I still hear from women today about how much they loved the classes that I taught. So that store was open until 2017 when I actually shifted gears and I was I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I ended up working a corporate job for 3 years that was not aligned with me for sure. But a good healing process, good way to take a look at where I wanted to go. And I actually started KP Creative Media as a website design company. And I quickly, literally within 3 months, said, not for me. It's great. I love it as far as I know how to update somebody's website if I needed to, my own, which is great, but not me to create other people's. But I'm like an original Audible member. I absolutely love to listen to audiobooks. I love to listen to podcasts. And it was actually my youngest son who was a senior in high school at that time. And he said, Mom, I really think you'd be really good at editing podcasts. So took a class. And before that class ended, I had my first launch client. And I was so excited to bring this to the world to like actually help women get their voices out there because this is confidence building still. Again, even more because your business is like the direct line to you, right? It is actually you getting paid. It is you making a living and you like sharing what you are. And so I really loved the idea that I was helping these women get their voices out into the world. And through that, after a while, I realized I really need a next step. And so I got certified as a podcast growth coach, and I'm even bigger and better at what I'm helping women do. And I specifically help spiritual women. They are actually the ones that found me, believe it or not. I've always had a little bit of a woo part of me. I've always had my favorite crystals and whatnot. And even years later, I was like, oh, I didn't realize I was collecting crystals all my whole life. but priestesses were finding me, light healers were finding me. I was just attracting them. And so I was like, you know what? These are my people anyway. And so that's who I help. And I help them create the podcasts that will show their expertise, whether or not it's sharing their modalities through the podcast, or whether or not it is just sharing their coaching sessions, or whether it's just sharing their stories so that they can get their people to know them, their listeners, their followers to know them, to like them, to trust them, and then just grow their following, grow their people, grow their business one listener at a time, one person at a time. And yeah, I absolutely love it. I love being a confidence booster. And while I call myself a podcast growth coach, I have seriously considered maybe calling myself a confidence coach just for that reason. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
oh
love
my
it.
gosh. I love that it sounds like really lit up when you talk about it. And may I say, you look amazing. I did not know that you were 50. I thought you were
Yeah.
in your 30s.
Thanks.
Yes. What a I just love hearing stories of how like the journey goes for people, how it starts and how it evolves. So, what do you think is like one truth or maybe mindset shift that changed everything for you when you started like getting into podcasting?
Yeah, I think what you need to realize is that everybody has a different story in their life. You could grow up a twin and you still are going to have different feelings, different thoughts, different ways that you might do stuff. Sure, you might have exactly the same ways and whatever. But even though, for instance, even though my story may be similar to somebody else's because maybe my parents divorced at 8, so I have that road that I had to travel down. Or I got married at 21. I have that road I traveled down. So there's different avenues and different roads to your life that make your story unique. But sharing that with the world then means that you can then just maybe have that one connection, whatever that
Mhm.
connection is, that one connection. And once you share that, somebody else can be like, yes, I got married at 21 too. And I really feel that because I've been around the block a little bit. Or maybe, or hardships. People are really into, unfortunately, people are really into hardships, right? So my hardship might be like when I was younger or when I first had children, I never wanted to have C-sections and I had to have two. And I was just,
Mhm.
it was really hard. Now, not everybody would understand. Maybe some people are like, no, I chose mine, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there could be somebody else out there and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I tried for a VBAC too and failed as well. I understand. And it's just that connection that women have, right? These are the things that we're missing now. They used to have mystery schools back in the day where we would share those in like one on one together, but we don't have that connection as much anymore. So sharing this vocally through a podcast and just being able to give more information about yourself aligns you with the proper people that you want in your life.
Yeah, I feel like I've given people so much advice about when they're either going through something or not feeling great or don't want to post on social media. And I'm like, oh, this is when you should. And I can cheer other people on about that. And I had not done that. And I struggled to do that. And I struggled to find my words to do that. And I just recently started to say, you know what? I'm going to take this experience that I had and share it because I feel like I've gained so much knowledge on it. So let me try to put it out there and take my own advice because I think that it's like how this podcast evolved too. I want other people to share their inspiration and their inspiring stories because it helps me. And I know that if it's helping me, it's going to be helping somebody else, like you had said, as people connect in different ways. So you never know what parts of their story or what's going to resonate with somebody.
Say very often that there's so many, you should start with being your own client. And I think that's how that is, right? For you, is you're getting that information out and you're almost giving yourself that little bit of nurturing that you would share with the client,
Mhm.
you're also doing to yourself, and people can hear that. So being your first, and maybe not your first, but being the client of yourself is a great way to share those stories, those analogies. And then it's working too, which is great.
And even when I started this podcast, and I'm like, when I first started, my coach was like, just put it out there. Nobody really listens to the first couple anyways. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I was like so wanting it to be a certain way and wanted to speak a certain way. And I was like, you know what? People are just gonna have to grow with me. They're just gonna have to come along for the ride if they want it,
You
if they
got
want to
it.
listen. And it's been incredible. So I love what you do because I have found that I have had so much growth through this process. And I think everybody should work on editing their first couple podcasts by themselves because you will hear all of the things that you didn't realize that you
Yep.
say that are annoying to you so much, or that you repeat often, all of the stutters or the ums or whatever comes up. It's such a good learning experience to hear that back, even though it's really cringy to hear your own voice sometimes. I think it's
Yeah.
so worth it.
And I challenge you to not actually get rid of those first recordings that you have to edit to. Take them and actually do something with them, because a lot of people would say, you know what? I had to do so much editing. I threw it out and I started over. Don't do that. It's growing. And even maybe start with a intro. This is my first or second episode. And hey, I'm just going to let you know that it's not perfect. As a matter of fact, my very first episode of my podcast, episode number 1, is the hardest episode you'll ever make, because it
Yeah.
is legitimately the hardest episode that you'll ever make because you're scared. You're like, what are people going to think? You know what?
Mhm.
Many people are never going to listen to that first episode. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I had deleted so many recordings and I would re-record because I didn't want to edit. So if I had any two ums or whatever, I was like, nope, gone. I'm not editing this. And yeah, I struggled a lot until my coach was like, you know what? If you want to put it out there, you're just gonna have to do it. You're just gonna have to rip the band-aid. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And I'm so happy that I did. And I tell people that all the time when I hear them say that they want to possibly start a podcast. I'm like, just do it. And they're like, I'm not really I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't know the theme, it will just evolve. Like mine's just be like it continues to evolve. And I love that about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great medium for growing and also evergreen. You know what I mean? So you could say to people when you're on episode 150, you could say to them, I challenge you to go back and listen to episode 1 or 2 because they stink. I know they stink, but you know what? You have to start somewhere. And it's what a confidence booster for that too, right? The theme of today's confidence, right? Just imagine having 150 episodes under your belt and then just being able to say, I made it through all of those one at a time and I
Yeah.
did it and I'm still here for it. So yeah,
Yeah. I
I love
love
it.
it. So there was like a process tool or practice that you're going to walk us through today. I'm super excited. I don't know what it is, but let us know and I'll give the floor to you.
All right. Yeah. So when you are thinking about what you want to do for your podcast, a lot of times people are talking specifically about having an intro, an outro, and like the main episode. I'm going to challenge you to remove your intro altogether. So this way, what you're doing is you're not getting people to automatically click through it on the podcast player saying, oh, I've already listened to this a couple of times. So my challenge is just dive right into the episode. Just be like, hey, this is, and then just talk about the podcast. And maybe you record it after you've already recorded the episode so that you can give like a little bit of this episode. We're going to be talking about confidence. And we had this great guest on, and she's going to talk about it. And then at the end, she's going to tell you a little sneak peek about something maybe you can do to shake it up a little bit so your audience stays intact or aligned in that case. You could certainly do something like that. Another opportunity here is always, if you have something that you want to talk about, always organically add it in. I don't know if you heard earlier, but I organically added in my very first episode, 001, the hardest episode you'll ever hear. So organically just add that in. It wasn't like a push. It
Mhm.
wasn't like, hey, buy my stuff. It was, hey, I had this episode, you can go listen to it. Or if you do have something that you are talking about, it's amazing if you had someone that you could bring on and coach them through it. So on my podcast, I offer to anyone that has a podcast, yourself, you can be one too. I offer them a podcast audit. It's 20 minutes and we go over your podcast stats, but I record them and then I make them into episodes. So I'm maintaining the authority. So I'm basically helping you. You're learning. You're basically saying, oh my gosh, I can grow my show this way, or I can do small little tweaks to get more ears on it for organic discoverability. But I'm also showing my authority by coaching somebody through that. And just like these little pieces, little different ways of doing things to shake it up. Before, years ago, when I first started this, it was intro, episode, outro. Sometimes like we bake in ads that's a term like where you actually put the ad in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
Now there's so many different platforms that you can actually add them dynamically in, which is nice. But we'd have to do all the baking. We'd have to find a spot, cut it, move the audio over, put the ad in, add some music to the beginning to the end. Yeah, it was a whole production. Still is a production, but now it's so much easier because you can just dynamically add that in. But it works so much nicer when people get that whole like organic. Oh, what did she have to say? Did she just say that you can start a podcast for under $20 and that was episode 005? Let me go listen to that. I want to know. So much
Yeah.
easier for somebody to do that. So, yeah, I hope that helps a little bit, a little more practice here about some things that you can really rethink for your podcast. It doesn't have to just be the way it used to be. It can be different. You can
Yeah.
make it different.
I love that you brought that up because now I am still on my old school mindset. I have the intro, the outro, and I'm like, I actually just revised the intro a little bit, but I had been thinking like maybe I should put like a little bit about what the episode's about before it starts, but then I'm like, oh, it's even more work.
Yeah.
But I love that you say like mixing it up like that. And the tip about, and I saw it, you like subtly put that 005 in there.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
love that. That's so good because especially if I know I'm speaking about something in an episode and then I have somebody on that maybe is touching on that subject and I can slide it in. Oh, I actually talked about this in detail on episode number 11 or whatever.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That is genius.
Yeah, and it's just so easy. And as long as you make the conversation continue to flow and you're offering value, that's always been the number one thing I've told people. Don't just throw an episode out there that doesn't have any value or it doesn't just, as a matter of fact, one of my things I tell clients is unless you're doing a coaching episode, you really should only have one guest a month. And then all
Mm,
the other ones should either be a coaching episode or you showing your authority with the solo episode. But the coaching episode should be you showing your authority, but helping the client. So it's
yeah.
like a win-win for them. And it's just realistically all the time value. Show yourself, share your stories, share your wisdom, and let the people know who you are. And then there's other things, pieces to it, right? So organic discoverability, we use a little bit of SEO for your podcast titles, your name, your description. The very first thing that podcast players pull from is the name of your podcast itself. So make sure that is really punched with a bunch of keywords. The description is the next thing, and that's the podcast description itself, not the show notes, but the podcast description. Then the titles of each podcast. It actually will pull your name too. So if you have your name and maybe you have title next to your name, you could actually get some more organic discoverability that way. But don't spend a whole lot of time on your show notes. Your show notes are really just for you or your listener. They're never going to find your episode through your show notes. So just adding in a couple of lines just to help them figure out what this is about, and then maybe a link or two. But if you're looking for organic discoverability with that, it really just needs to go on your website as a blog post, really.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good information to know as well. So, what is like can you give us some common mistakes that you see people doing, like your clients? Is there a theme or something that that comes up a lot?
Yeah, I think the common theme that I have been finding is that you do not start you don't start your podcast name with something that is easily found by organic discoverability. So my suggestion, and one of the reasons why I have my podcast names podcasting for spiritual women, is basically a keyword podcasting, which yes, it's everywhere on there, but spiritual women may not be. So if you are looking, I can tell right away from the name of my podcast and from my cover art what this is about, podcasting, and who it's for, spiritual women. And then if you want, you can actually add a title extension in your podcast host. So whether you use Buzzsprout, Podbean, Captivate, any of those, Libsyn, you can actually have it have a different name, and then or have the full name that you have, and then have an extension that isn't even on your cover art, so that it just has more keywords stuffed in there. And I say stuffed. And I know I'm also, like I said, I started as a website designer. So I know you're not supposed to stuff keywords. But in this particular case, the podcast players aren't like Google. Like you Google something right now and AI pops up with a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
Podcast players are not like that yet. So now's a perfect time to get all those listeners to like really get that keywords honed in, and you can change that title extension anytime. You can change your description anytime. Another thing I see people do a lot, my clients do a lot, is they start their podcast description. And again, this is for the podcast in a whole, not the show notes, but the hot podcast as a whole. They start with welcome. So glad you're here. No, those aren't keywords. Start with a keyword.
Mm.
Start with a whole bunch of keywords and find a nice sentence up and punch it. Like, because the most of the listeners aren't going to be reading that. What's reading that are the podcast players when people are typing in,
Oh, yeah.
I want to find a podcast on whatever the topic might be, gardening or chickens or something like that.
Yeah.
You want to start with the keywords and really punch that in. And anything else that you put down there, it should just be keyword driven. You can actually even add in some like Google style questions that you then make into podcast titles to really give it more punch. So there's a lot of like little tweaks and a lot of little things that you can do that are simple and easy. I talked to somebody last week, and while we were on the little podcast audit, she's going to be on my podcast next week. And while we were on her podcast audit, she's doing it right there.
Yep.
I love this. I'm fixing it all up right now. I'm in Buzzsprout right now. What do I have to do? How's this? Do you like this? And it's just little tweaks to change it so people can really find you, because it's all about being found and then welcoming them into the fold and welcoming them into your world with your voice.
Oh, that's such great advice. Yeah, I feel like I'm just like in awe. I'm like, okay, tell me more, please.
Yeah. There's so many different tweaks, so many different pieces that people, and I love that people are just, I've got a podcast. I want to get it out there. But there becomes a time where you're like, I got it out there. I've been recording every week, but my numbers are like 12. I've got 12 downloads. And that, while 12 is not bad, that's 12 super fans. Okay, let's face it, probably 11 super fans, and you're listening to your own. That's It doesn't matter. Those 11 people could still be clients. They could be aligned and get into your work. But if you could, like, another like little tip or trick here is like, you could read off one of the reviews that maybe somebody gives you an Apple, and that would like then spark somebody to say, "Oh my, I listened to it. I'm going to give it." And the more reviews, the more you can share, then the more SEO, the more organic deliverability, the more it grows, yeah. So it's just, and there's so many little tweaks that you could just do to make it, and none of them are hard. It's just one step. I know we talked about it before we started, but it's like going on a diet and you lose 1 pound a week.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, yeah, great. That was 1 pound. That was one. Okay, great. Okay, so I've done 1 pound. But at the end of 3 months, I mean, if it's 1 pound a week, it's 12 pounds, 15 pounds, 16 pounds, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You like look back and you're like, holy moly, I lost 30 pounds this year or whatever it is. And you just don't even realize until you've seen sometime. So
Yes. And I actually had gotten off my health journey a while ago, and I jumped back on it, like, probably 2.5 years ago, and I literally did lose 30 pounds, and it took a year for me to, like, really look at back and be like, "Wait, I just weighed myself and I'm 30 pounds down," and then I looked at pictures and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, I can really see it." And so I
yeah,
I love that analogy that you gave because I try to look at that with so many different things. Okay, it's just like one thing, and I've had so many people on the podcast that can back up that little tiny micro tweaks, micro things that you do. So you think that sometimes you have this huge task and you're like, I'm just going to chip away at this tiny piece. What is that going to do? But it really does add up. And so I love that you brought that up. So if somebody is just starting out and feels unsure or overwhelmed, what's a tiny first step that you would tell them to take if they could do one thing?
they could do one thing. If they already have a podcast and they could do one thing, my suggestion to them is to just take a look at your podcast name and your podcast description and just make sure that they have keywords in them and tell us who it's for. Don't just say, this is the Red Podcast. Okay, great. So, who is the Red Podcast for? Red Podcast for priestesses, Red Podcast for light healers. Who is it for?
Okay.
And make it super easy for people to see that also in your cover art. Make your words nice and big. Like, you can show your face on all your socials and whatnot, but on your cover art, make it easy. Because remember, they're on these tiny little devices, so you
Mhm.
can't really see everything. But if you make that name huge, nice and big, and keyword for who it's for, it's going to be easier for people to find you. And ultimately, isn't that what you want? People to find you, get into your world, and start listening.
Yeah. What about if somebody is thinking about a podcast? Because I have a couple people that I know. Hopefully, they'll listen to this and get so much inspiration. But if they are thinking about it, but there's like hesitation there, and maybe it's some type of perfectionism or overwhelm, what would you say to that person?
You have a unique story. Everyone here has a unique story, whether or not lived one direction or another direction, whether or not you were rich or poor, fat or thin, whatever the case may be. Everybody has a unique story, and you're going to find that aligned person by sharing it one story at a time. You shouldn't have more than one story in every podcast episode or in any podcast episode. So in this case, you have multiple lives that you've lived, right? Multiple stories that you've lived. Just start sharing one story at a time. Share and don't be afraid. And you can, if this is really something where you're like, I don't know that I want my family and friends to find out about this. You can actually release the podcast under like an assumed name and not tell anybody about it if that is more comfortable for you. But I just suggest if you're already doing lives or if you're already podcast guesting or if you just are writing and journaling, whatever you're journaling about, start there and keep going. Just make it vocal. It may not align with your human design. My human design, I have a well-defined throat chakra. So think it could be that too.
I think that's great advice, though. I never really thought about that, like what you're journaling, specifically with coaches and people in the realm that I am in. Journaling is like something we do all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is a wonderful suggestion because I literally was taking pictures of some of the things that I had wrote 5 years ago and sending them to my brother, and I was like, "Look at how profound this is." I forgot some of the stuff that I had wrote down. And yeah, I think that's such a great idea. A great
And
start.
just any kind of stories. Yeah, any kind of stories that you have that you feel like would be connecting to your audience. And sometimes you're like, I have no idea. I struggled for years trying to figure out how I was going to connect my craft store business with my podcasting business. I was like, they don't have anything to do with one another. Until I looked, you have to take that 10,000 mile view and look at it and say, oh my gosh, I am helping the same women and I'm helping them with their confidence and I'm helping them say and do and be the person that they want to do and be and say. So It's like sometimes we're so close to it, you can't see the forest through the trees. Is that
Yeah.
that's the saying, I think? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This has been such an amazing conversation. I am very intrigued by your work. I think that you're doing incredible things, and anything to do with helping people find their confidence, boost their confidence, find that because, like, I'm a deep love healing coach. Like, I want everybody to fall in love with themselves because that is the best thing you could ever do in your life, in my opinion. And I'm a work in progress. I'm way better than I used to
No.
be, but that's what, creates that space for me to understand. But yeah, I think that your work is so amazing. Is there anything that we didn't go over that maybe you wanted to share?
I gave a little tidbit of like how I work and who I work with. So I think if you have any questions or if anybody has any questions, anybody, I do have a 20-minute free call. So you can definitely get on to that and just pick my brain for 20 minutes or just, get to know me. I love meeting people. Like I said, I'm a human design projector, 5-1, and I absolutely adore networking with people, meeting them. I love to meet people from different aspects of their life, where they are, what they're doing. And if you find yourself in that spiritual realm, you and I can be besties for life. So I love it.
Awesome. We will have the links to all of your things in the show notes. And it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review so that we can connect with more people to develop our mind, body, and spirit.